Welcome back, everyone, to the Council for Maintenance podcast. If this is your first time joining us, we're a show that takes a behind-the-scenes look into the gritty, non-glamorous life of aircraft maintenance. We share some laughs, impart some wisdom, all in hopes of giving you that split seconds relief in your day that can hopefully prevent a mishap. I am your co-host, Six.
I'm MVP.
And our third co-host, Shoreline, is here in the back, silently monitoring our audio and making sure our faces stay fit for radio. So we've talked some episodes ago about the Aerospace Maintenance Competition, and we were fortunate enough to have some competitors who were participating in one year's show onto our podcast, which was fantastic. And since it's been some time, the last time we did that, we decided to bring it on again, and especially because the AMC is happening very soon in the next couple of weeks. If you have not been to the Aerospace Maintenance Competition and you've thought about aircraft maintenance as a career, or you want to see some of the new up and coming things that are happening in aviation, that is definitely one of the best places to go and see it. Besides the competition itself, it's happening alongside the MRO Americas, which is a huge convention, again, for all things aviation. So if aviation is your bit, or you're looking to make this a career, or you want to learn more, it's definitely one of those things to go to. And we were fortunate enough to have a former and a going to be competitor at the AMC, Mr. Charles Hayworth. Hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Good. Say likewise. Once again, Charles here, longtime listener, first time caller.
Yeah, I've been listening. I first came across you guys shortly after the competition last year. Actually, I've been a pretty steady listener since then.
Nice, appreciate that. I mean, that's glad to hear that. Like that. The show has made it integral, so to speak, with the AMC. We have spoken to some of the social media people that run the AMC. Not exactly sure which person it is, but it's really nice knowing, that this competition exists. I believe it was the first time we did an episode covering this, we didn't even know it existed, or
nice.
Or existed, but we didn't know like who could participate. So
Right.
It was like pretty shocking. It was like, wait a minute, all these people can come in too? I thought it was just like an internal thing. Like some places, like certain regions in Canada, they held their own internal one for like certain airline groups or whatnot, and it's almost closed loop. Like you have to like know about it to be about it. But
yeah,
here we are with the AMC, and it's definitely one of those things that, oh, this is cool. This is something that everyone should know about, or at least be enthusiastic to want to learn more about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's aircraft maintenance is kind of a niche area anyways. And then when you take that and you narrow it down a little bit further to like competitive aircraft maintenance, it can be, I can see it being hard to kind of like get the word to spread out there. But from what I understand, they had pretty record registrations this year. So I think it's going in a positive direction for them.
Most definitely. I believe I think it was last year or the year before, they had over 30 plus teams. I want to say that's about roundabout right. And
yeah, I was going to ask how many signed up last year and how many have signed up this year.
I'm not sure how many signed up last year. I haven't looked that up. I do know because they just posted about it the other day, and I went through and counted. They've got 90 teams registered this year.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And for those out there, this is not just like airline groups. This is like airline companies. This is military. This is colleges. And I think like some MRO OEMs are in there as well. So it's pretty big. And I believe like some teams, depending on how big their organization is, they're allowed to have 5 teams, 3 or 5 teams.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I want to say it's teams of 5 for sure.
Yeah, it's teams of 5, and then you have like a team captain / alternate.
Okay.
They kind of go around with the team. They're familiar with all the events in case somebody, ends up getting sick or has to fly home for a family emergency or something.
Gotcha. And then again, like when the last time we covered this, some of the events they're pretty up there. It was cool to just know that this kind of stuff was an event. Like I believe MVP and we were talking about how one event was like a virtual painter episode. Virtual painter event. And like,
Yeah.
that'd be pretty cool to see. Like, I wonder how you would score that. I mean, and then there was other ones like a human factors test, which I feel like that doesn't get touched on enough, or it's one of those things like that can fall to the wayside because of goals or revenue or mission or whatever the end result you're trying to achieve for your organization is.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. You wouldn't think that would be in a maintenance competition, but I mean, it is a big part of maintenance. It's just an unsung part of maintenance.
No kidding.
And it goes to show kind of, the group, the AMC, the Aerospace Maintenance Council that organized the competition, kind of, where their focus is, which is where everybody in aviation maintenance should be, and that's safety at the heart of it all.
Most definitely. And I believe it was you and your team. We were conversing with each other offline. I think it was directly after the last AMC, and we were talking about like how the majority of the events, although were great, it was mostly fixed wing based, actually almost exclusively fixed wing based. And some of them were like, you had to have like had experience in commercial airlines to really soak in what's going on. And
correct.
It was your team and it was us and another group of individuals for another episode. We talked about like, it'd be fun if there was a helicopter event at the AMC and just see how many people get really thrown off their base that were put in place.
Yeah, it would be almost the great equalizer, right? So you have these teams dominating, but that one event knocks them down a few pegs and really makes them on the same level as other teams.
Right. So, let me jump in a little bit on this. I was on the 128th Aviation Brigade Team Blackhawk last year. We took first place in the military category, and then also from our unit was Team Chinook, and they ended up taking third place. And the entire time we were at the competition, we were talking about, how it's all fixed wing and it's, kind of another level for us because we're all helicopter maintainers, right? Because the Army employs helicopters. And we thought it would really be cool if there was a helicopter event. Excuse me. And so we came back and I had been kind of ruminating over this in my head. And it was the episode you guys did. I think you called it, was it Influencers Roundtable?
Yeah.
Along those lines?
Yep.
And you guys had briefly touched on it there. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, well, now I have to make this happen because I can't let anybody else beat me to the punch. And so I went back to work the next day and I started talking to some of the other team members. And the other guy who's going with me, RJ Clements, he kind of stepped up and was like, hey, man, I'll be your number 2 on this because you need 2 judges for the events. So he's going with me, and he's, kind of spent the last 8 months working side by side with me trying to make this happen.
Awesome.
And that's a very good point to make too, especially for helicopters. Myself, I'm a helicopter mechanic. So a lot of the stuff when MVP recollects of like his time at AOG, we were maybe 8 months in working together before I finally touched hands on a fixed wing plane. I'm like, yeah, what is this? Right. I mean, there was some commonality, which a lot of helicopter mechanics can attest to. Like there's some commonality between all airframes. Like it all has to have an engine. It has a way of turning it into propulsion somehow. It has to have aerodynamics and all this and stuff. But there are a lot of intricacies that helicopter mechanics have to deal with that fixed wing guys may not exclusively know, and vice versa. So going back to that episode when we were having this roundtable discussion, where like this ought to be a thing to do to have to kind of give helicopter mechanics that familiarity and that extra leg peg up, so to speak, compared to the fixed wing guys. Because I mean, to attest to your team and to everyone else military who competed, like majority of them or a good chunk of them were not fixed wing mechanics, and for them to place in any place is just fundamental to the training that aircraft mechanics get, especially if they're not trained to fixed wing. So that kind of speaks a little bit about the generality or the overall concept of operation that all mechanics have to know, or technicians would have to know. But then it's also like, well, where's our leg in the woods? You know, where do we have a leg up on everybody else? Because some of these events, like I said, like with the virtual painting booth or fan blade removal or the APU burn can, like I've only touched an APU burn can maybe like 7 times ever. And most of it was on the last 2 platforms that I touched, which was like a year and some change ago. But if I were to be if I've never, that part never happened in my life, and I go to that competition, like, what is this?
Right.
And some of the instructions, you know, they're very clear cut for the most part. I mean, I can't attest because neither myself nor MVP were in an AMC, but the instructions kind of spell out what you got to do, or at least to a certain point. And so, like, if you sit there long enough, you may figure it out. But you can tell guys who've done this sometime where they're just like not even having to look at the instructions, and then they're just blasting through it.
You see some of those teams from like American Airlines and like the big carriers. Those guys are set.
Yep.
Zooming through some of those tasks.
It's like dime a dozen to them. Like this happens all the time.
Right.
I believe there's one that was like a window install. I mean, I've done a window install, but again, like helicopter canopies versus commercial airline or windscreens, there's some slight differences to it, or at least the ones that don't explode when, you know, like in case of emergency. So that's a definite difference. But for this year, as you've attested to, like there's now going to be a helicopter event in the AMC, which when that news dropped, both MVP and I were like laughing amongst ourselves, like, good. Let the suffering commence.
Yeah. No, it should be pretty good. Shortly after you guys had aired that podcast and we started working on it, it took us a good, trying to count, before everything was really finalized, it was a good 8 months of coordinating, lots of emails, some phone calls. Because the 2 biggest things to it really were, the first thing, getting people to understand what the competition was, right? So you can go to someone and tell them like, what's this maintenance competition? It's like, oh, well, all these teams are going to come to this city and they're going to, you know, they're going to do a bunch of, you know, they're 28 or 29 events, whatever it is. And all the teams are going to do it. And that gives them kind of a basic picture of how it is. But I think for something like the AMC to really understand what it is, really understand the magnitude and how things work, you really have to go there and see it. And so that was hard for us to do. And then the second part, obviously, was getting somebody to pay for it, right?
Yes.
And so I had the idea of reaching out to another part of the Army that had, you know, access to funds for this type of thing. It's the Army's marketing office, basically. Mm-hmm. And so I was explaining all of this to them. And at this point, these guys aren't even aviation, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're bean counters.
Essentially. And, but they were very receptive to the whole thing, right? They were like, this sounds really good. We had put together some kind of ad hoc market research about how this could go out to the public, right? So some numbers, some social media numbers. This is what this is going to look like. This is how many people are going to actually interact with the event. You know, there's this many people at the trade show altogether, etc. And they liked what we had and they rolled with it. And while this was going on, I had also reached out to the Aerospace Maintenance Council. So that's Mr. Ken McTiernan, Mr. John Goglia, and their team, right? And they were super excited about, you know, the opportunity to have us there. And so obviously that was helpful. And so it was just kind of several months of trying to coordinate between these different parties to make sure everybody was on the same page. And the team at the AMC they were really great to work with. If you guys have never worked with them, I know you guys said you've talked to them about social media stuff before. But when it comes to the crew that really plans the event and stuff, they were just super fantastic, super helpful. So that was nice. And then obviously the team, or not the team, but the individuals I worked with on the Army side, incredibly helpful. They walked me through a whole bunch of stuff that honestly, a random E6 on Fort Eustis has no business getting involved with. They walked me through all this paperwork, all these different rules and stuff that we had to follow. So yeah, it was nice. Just keeping everybody informed of the process was the biggest hurdle.
It's good that you had a very receptive group on both ends. One thing, when you had to, when you were trying to sell it on the Army side of the house, did you have to present a certain amount of tasks that had to be approved? Like, okay, we have these 5 tasks we can do for the competition, and you had to get the council to approve which 1 or 2 that you could use.
No, so the way the Aerospace Maintenance Council does it, right, is if you want to sponsor an event, you basically, and they have example forms on the website. You go there and you basically create the event that you want to sponsor, and you put it in, it's like Microsoft Word format essentially. You just kind of copy like the example that they have, so that way it's in the format that they understand or that they can translate. And so the Aerospace Maintenance Council side was really easy. For the Army, there was no like blueprints for how to do that part, right? And so I did what I thought would be best, and I did all of the homework before I approached anybody, or as much of the homework as I could think of before I approached anybody. So I had already put the event together, put the instructions together, put the rule sheet together, came up with like a rough draft of what it looks like, of how we get the maintenance device to Chicago, what we're going to do when we get there. Basically the entire plan before I had even brought the idea to anybody of importance. That way, by that time, when I'm talking to them, I can ask, or I can answer as many questions as they had, right?
Sure.
And I think that really worked out in our favor because it showed that we'd been doing our homework, that we were prepared. And so that worked out really well for us.
See this right here, Mr.
Probably
MVP.
Approaching it with some form of competency gave the approving parties confidence in what you were trying to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
So well done to you guys.
See, this right here, Mr. MVP, is what we call completed staff work. That thing that we've all been talking about for some time now. You know what I mean? So, so Mr. Hayward here, he's a prime example. And for anyone else out there, we encourage you to find out what the completed staff work doctrine is. If you can follow that example, you can apply it almost identically to what Mr. Hayworth has done to get your project off the ground. And a little snapshot of what it is, it's pretty much like you've done the homework already. You've basically built the project, and the only thing that's really stopping you is that approval, like that stamp of approval from a supervisor or director or so forth. In this case, the U.S. Army, to say, hey, we were going to go forward with this event. All the work's been done already. It's all laid out, and majority of the questions, I'd say all of it, but majority of the questions have been answered already. So all they really got to go is like, looks good to me, stamp, and then move on with life. So again, big testament to yourself and all the people involved to actually make this happen. Because how many have had the opportunity to make this an event for the AMC, which I'm surprised is not swarming with all sorts of recruiters from all facets of life. Well, for at minimum, I would think the military for sure should be there. Because, I mean, if anyone's ever seen recruiting events for any service, they're pretty much everywhere that there's a large number of people. And I'm rather surprised that this hasn't been a thing already. But now that it is, right? Now we can see, depending on how the event itself goes, not just the one the U.S. Army sponsoring, but the entire event as a whole. This can honestly open the floodgate to more stuff, right? And which we highly encourage. Like, this is like step one of the helicopter side of the house. I can think like of a million different things that can really throw people for loops as far as the helicopter is concerned. Like,
Oh yeah.
like drivetrain alignments or gearbox removals and stuff like that. It's relatively simple, but it's one of those things that you're just not used to seeing, especially for fixed wing guys. Like, what the heck is a drivetrain?
Right.
So going on with the event itself, like, what made you guys decide to pick track and balance for the event?
Okay. So the main rotor track and balance, right? And I'll be a little particular about what I say in terms of track and balance, because I do expect my competitors out there to do their homework still.
Mhm.
Wink, wink. But when we started looking at it, right, you had mentioned it before, there's a ton of similarities between working on a rotorcraft versus a fixed wing aircraft, right? For the most part, it's all nuts and bolts. And, obviously we have a turbine engine. So anything turbine engine work is going to be pretty much the same as like what Pratt and Whitney's bringing for their event, but on a smaller scale. Any kind of sheet metal work that we would do on a helicopter is going to be essentially the same. And so I'd sat down for a day or two trying to think of what kind of event is going to be like really true to the helicopter maintainer lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And first thing that came to mind is doing a track and balance. And because airplanes, they don't have spinning rotors with all this equipment spinning below it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of broke that down into the different, like, I guess you'd call it like phases of a track and balance that you would do, and tried to pinpoint the best part of it that I could capture within that 15-minute time window that you have for the competition. You've worked on helicopters, and so you can attest to the fact that, sometimes the track and balance can be done and ready to go in 90 minutes. It might take 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of narrowed it down to strictly doing a PC link adjustment, or that's a pitch change link for those of you who aren't familiar. Because it's simple, it's going to get you kind of involved in the actual hardware that's going to be heavily different than you'll find on a fixed wing aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit of a challenge because you're working with hardware that's tightening and loosening in opposite directions. So you're going to have to be able to kind of think quickly on your feet. You're going to have to use a little bit of precision when you make that actual adjustment. And of course, in the Army, we don't usually use safety wire pliers. And so everybody who's doing the safety wire for it is going to do it by hand, just like we do.
Nice.
I did not know that the Army does not utilize safety wire pliers. Or for real?
So in some cases you can. It's pretty rare though. On the vast majority of lines, you'll see people are doing safety wire by hand.
Really?
Wow.
Really?
Wow. It's been a while since I've done some by hand. Sometimes I'll do it just for fun and to stay relevant with it, but I usually make sure it's on something I can easily get to, and I'm not upside down on my head with where I can't see, and I'm just kind of like one eye squinting, trying to look up between linkages.
Right.
Yes.
And safety wire, Don't go to that extreme, but that's interesting. Do you guys use safety cable? Have you seen that stuff?
I used safety cable one time a couple of years ago, and it was physically on the engine.
Okay.
It was on a T901, or T701. Sorry.
Well, that's the new hotness, man. Is safety cable. Well, a good majority of stuff we've seen has slowly moved towards safety cable.
I love it.
It's a lot more expensive, but it's
right.
I guess the trade-off is time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Remember starting in your early days and you go safety something and the chief would come up and look at it. And I don't know why they had a pair of dikes in their pocket, but they would always look at it and go, if it was an abomination, it was definitely getting cut, but it could be even look good. And they'd be like, wow, that's really nice. Snip, do it again. Come on, man.
Most
Absolutely.
definitely.
I worked in the QC shop before I came over here to Virginia, so I understand that role completely.
and sometimes, like, oh, that looks great. Let's see if we can do repeatability is what they would say to me. Like, oh, let's see if you can repeat it. Like, oh, thanks.
Make sure it's not a one-off.
Yes,
but it's always on hour 15 too when they do that shit. You know what I mean? I just want to go home.
This took me 3 hours, man. Like, well, here's another 3. Oh man. Now I will say for the pitch change link adjustments for this event, my one and only hint for everybody here is mind the direction of rotation, because that can definitely throw you off. And I'm not sure what kind of pitch change links these ones are going to be utilizing, but there's different variants of these, so don't just think that you know one, you know them all. And
yeah, absolutely.
And I remember when that event first got announced by the AMC, like, oh, they're going to have a helicopter event. I don't know how many people have called us up or messaged us like, hey man, explain to me what this helicopter stuff is. I'm like, suffer. And it was definitely something I really had to really dig into. Like, okay, how do I explain this to someone who's never seen this before? So the plus side is it kind of got me back into the whole teaching method. Like, okay, how do I break this down by the numbers, right? Instead of just like, here, watch this video, because there's instruction videos out there for sure, but some of them are rather lengthy and they go a little too in depth as to why they do it versus how to do it, which is fantastic. I admit it's great that they took that time and energy to do it. But for, say, in the case of a competition, you just want it quick and dirty. And like, what do I got to do? Show me how. I'm like, what does this mean? And what does it do? And when this also got announced, I was wondering like, how is this going to play out? Because like you said, like I remember doing tracks and balances where it took days sometimes. Like we were chasing this forever. So I think my problem was when we were talking track and balance, my brain thought vibration analysis, and that can be a whole nother beast of itself, which it's kind of sort of similar to props, like turbo props in some degree, but even track and balance too. Turbo props will probably have the easiest time with this event, minus the actual pitch change link adjustment, understanding why it happened.
Oh, yeah, that part right there alone is going to be what makes or breaks the team.
Yes. and especially, like I said, with the mind the direction of rotation, because you may think you're going the right way, but you're not, and you're actually making it worse. And I would say for the turbo prop listeners out there, like picture like you're only adding weight to one side and only one side. Like you're not balancing it. You're not like distributing the weight evenly, and you're well past maxed out, but you're still hitting 0.9. You're terrible. And
yeah, that's pretty rough.
That's more or less like what this is going. But I'm glad to hear that this event is actually starting to exist with the AMC, and the fact that they're even receptive to it. So, I mean, once again, kudos to you guys and your teams for making this happen. And
thanks,
just you briefly explaining the process of it all, and especially for something like this big for an entity that's not normally wrapped up in aviation. Like there's no real template for anyone to come up with this. So now that one's kind of sort of exists, this leaves the gate open for someone to utilize, maybe improve upon or streamline it or something. Maybe somebody just found their route to the E9 section or to an E9 desk, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. And yeah, it was really nice that the AMC was really receptive to it, because they could have, I mean, corporations, they're all different. Not that the AMC is a corporation. Organizations are all different, right? Mm-hmm. They could have very easily been like, nah, man, we're about like airplanes. Okay. Mm-hmm. But they weren't. They were super nice. And when I had reached out to Ken, when I sent him an email, I sent him, bless his heart for reading it, because it was probably 2 pages long, explaining why we wanted to do this. The biggest thing that I had emphasized to him, right, was that we wanted to do this to get people interested in Army aviation stuff, because we were trying to be essentially stewards to our profession, right?
Yep.
Which in a lot of ways is what the AMC is to aviation in general. And so I think that resonated a lot with him. And because he got back to me, I think the next day, and he was like, dude, let's do it. And so we've been on a crazy magical ride ever since that day. It's been great.
And so do you guys have to provide like the rotor head linkages, everything for the competition? Is that how that works? Sorry, it's my own ignorance. I'm just asking.
No, that's a good question. So I am stationed out here at Fort Eustis, right, which is the home of Army Aviation Maintenance Training. I was an instructor for a while. Now I work in basically like training development type stuff. But the nice thing about that is we have all the training devices here, right? And so we have this training device, to kind of describe it to you. It's a main rotor head that sits on top of the static mast, and it has what's called the mixer assembly and the PC links all attached to it, right? And it sits on this rolling base that you can push around. It's super helpful when you're teaching students and you don't want to try and get a whole class of 12 climbing on top of a helicopter to look at all these parts, because you can push this literally right into a classroom and everybody can look at it right there. So they gave me permission to steal it for a week, and we're going to put it in the back of a box truck, and we're going to drive it to Chicago and unload it at McCormick Place.
Nice.
Yeah,
I mean,
Cool.
The fact that you guys actually have a training aid like this, I mean, it's pretty cool. Because maybe this was my experiences in the service. Like a lot of our trainers were just broken down versions of stuff that used to work.
Yeah.
It's all stuff that was had parts canned off. This is where you would replace it if it existed on this airframe.
Yes.
But we took it. We took it and put it on a flying asset.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's exactly me. Like we had this one plane that we called it the Hoopty. It was literally just like throw away parts from everything, and we just had enough of it to piecemeal a makeshift plane out of it. Like this is what it would look like if it were an actual plane. And some of it, like you can tell, like this thing's been kicked around enough times. It's been having tools lost and dropped on it, or people kicking it and all kinds of stuff. It was beat up. So we're learning on this literal scrap monster thing, and some of these parts were just like placeholders. Like it would be here, as MVP said. Like if there was like a realistic visualization of a dotted line, like this would be here if it existed. That would have been that plane, and then. So going from this to going into the real life field where you actually see these parts move and operate, like, what is this? It's very different to see something on paper or in a picture and then actually see it work. Like, oh, that's what it is. That's how it works.
And what sort of instructions or aid do you provide, or are you providing to the different teams? Like I know, we have maintenance manuals for everything. So do you provide a small snippet of the maintenance manual to do that particular job, or you have to handwrite your own?
Yeah, I basically cut and pasted from like the technical manual that we use and put it into a Word document, because that's how the AMC has it formatted anyway. So that way they can paste it directly into their the competition manual.
Yep.
So I just sat there and just to make sure I didn't miss anything. You've done it 100 times, but you always want to go through the manual anyways. I went right through it and took out what I didn't need, because obviously we're only doing just a portion of the track and balance, right? And so it's real broken down step by step. It's pretty easy to follow. I don't think I used any acronyms just because of the lack of familiarity for your fixed wing guys. So instead of saying PC link, it should say pitch change link, things like that. Yeah, and so it's super simple. I think the whole thing is going to be 6 or 7 steps without looking it back up real quick.
Nice.
So super simple, yeah. And you made a good point about the direction of adjustment, and I have considered making a video on that specifically for this. So that may or may not pop up between now and the beginning of April.
Yeah, you got to make sure you put that on private because you get some peeping eyes.
Yeah.
This is my team only, or people who are of the helicopter realm. And so going over that, since you've been part of the competition and your team has placed, what are some of the penalties that you can get for any event, not just this event, but for any event? Like, what are some of the more common ankle biters for penalties? Like,
the gotcha is like the most people don't think about type stuff, but it takes points away.
Yeah, a lot of it is safety based, right? So not wearing your glasses, like your safety glasses, if you're doing safety wire. I think some of the ones that used POL type stuff, if you weren't wearing your gloves, it seems like that was the biggest one that was recurring throughout the whole competition.
Interesting.
Last year I did the FedEx floor lock, the FedEx cargo floor lock, which I think was new last year.
Okay.
Total ball buster of an event. And I think they even admitted it that themselves. That was super hard, way harder than I expected it to be. And I was penalized because once I got it back together, it didn't function properly because I put it back together wrong. But I managed to get it installed. So that was helpful because I didn't get docked points for not having it installed. I was only docked points for it being put back together incorrectly. So, just a kind of a heads up for your competitors. If you guys go through and you read what the penalties are, if you know you're not going to be able to do something 100% correct just for points reasons, read through because you might be able to get a few extra points here and there just by progressing forward in another part of the task.
What's interesting is you said, you were able to get it back together. It wasn't together correctly, but you were able to install it. And I wonder if FedEx went back and said, we got to revise our manuals here. We learned something about that. We didn't know this was possible, but it's possible. I wonder if those things kind of happen at the competition, like the manufacturers or the companies go, oh boy, this is actually possible. And they didn't know it's possible because they have their own training set up, right, for new hires. And so it's taught a certain way, but an outsider who doesn't know, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, sorry, freewheeling over here.
No, you're fine. I don't know. So I feel like, obviously, yeah, like you said, they have their own in-house training because I watched the FedEx guys do it, and it made me angry watching them do it because they made it look so easy.
Well,
it was like spring here, spring there, this clip out, take a look at it, put it back together. I was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
What did you do?
Well, that's also something, like they see this day in, day out, right? So it's kind of like it's probably their gotcha thing for their new guys, like, oh, he or she's gonna do that, right? And they all they all snicker silently as they do it. I would also say, since we're talking about penalties, this brings up a core memory of MVP and I had when we were at the last ever High Healy Expo / Verticon. As we're looking through all the different exhibits, you can tell who MVP actually pointed out. You can tell who were the mechanics and who weren't because all the mechanics are like touching things that only mechanics would know were there. And then MVP and I we were thinking about doing this practical joke. We never actually went through with it, but we would put like penalty slips on all the different exhibits because they had XYZ wrong of it. Like your mounting things were wrong. There's FOD everywhere.
Right.
You not enough thread protrusion. You
didn't cap this off correctly, or you didn't unplug this, or whatever the case may be.
Bent pins in an electrical receptacle.
Yeah. So
I thought it would be funny to walk around and just hand people like, "Hey, here's your fail."
just like demonstrating like this is how we can nitpick through things, and that it just off tangent again, but that's kind of like what sparked my memory about penalties, because it's always the things like you least expect, like you know right off the bat, like okay, don't cheat, don't converse while the person's working or whatever the case, like the easy rules. But the ones that you think are what's it called, non-incidental, are the ones that end up making you fail. I mean, on top of being hostile to the judges, I guess. But
I think one of the biggest ones is like, you're at a competition, but you're working on a small part, but it's not installed on the asset, so you don't go to the extremes, I guess, maybe as you might if it was on an active asset. You would, you say, okay, well, FOD prevention or whatever else, you skip those steps because this is just on a bench here. I don't have to. It's not going to be installed on anything ever, but you have to treat it right. You're in the competition, so all aspects of it have to be treated like it was. You're on the line doing this job.
So I will say that as a testament to the competition, because I kind of expected. Just like you said, it's a competitive environment. You're gonna be willing to let some things slip here and there. Man, I can't think of a single incident where I saw that. All the maintainers there, including the students, were incredibly professional about it. They kept all their tools organized. They reset their torque wrenches to 0. They took care of their FOD, the whole 9. It was really impressive to see, honestly.
Nice.
I wonder if that was like something like that was taught to them. Like, hey, make sure. Like if they did that as a standard practice, like as an aircraft maintainer, period, or if that was something they specifically stressed, because of the event. Like, hey, don't get docked, easy points.
I think it's just something that's beat into us.
Yeah,
it's ingrained. It's second nature. We don't think about it because it was ingrained into us so early on in our career and beat into our brains that we just do it unknowingly. It's just. Again, it's second nature, right? So we're focusing on the task at hand, but these little things like your document, maybe documentation is a stretch, but like cleaning up your FOD, resetting torque wrenches, it's just robotic movements because it's something you've been taught from day one.
Right.
And the reason why I brought that up is because whenever, I mean, you mentioned you're in the QC realm as well, so like that's like the easy hits, like low hanging fruit almost, because it's so common. Like, oh, you didn't put your torque wrench back to 0, or you forgot to put your tools back in their proper silhouette, or something like that, right? Like such low hanging fruit. It's almost like, who are you and why are you here? Kind of fails. Like is this the first time you've ever touched a plane in your life? Kind of thing. And that was the reason why I brought it up. Is like, is this something like they've preached about in each of their little training regimes, or is this just something they specifically said like for the competition, like do not get docked, easy points? It's like, think of this as like a really big audit, and they're watching your every move and they're scrutinizing every little thing about you down to your attitude. And if something just wasn't right or it fell off, they're just like, okay, easy hit,
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of that involved. And I've seen it. I've seen it on our teams here, right? Last year as a competitor, we had talked about that, right? Like it's second nature for us to, or is it first nature? I'm not sure how that term goes, but like if you're going to do lock wire, you go get some safety glasses and put it on, right? But when you're going out to, do track and balance adjustment or, launch a helicopter or whatever, those things they come natural to you. But when the difference for the AMC, and we had talked about this a little bit leading up to last year's competition, is it's a different kind of pressure that's on you, right? Mm-hmm. There's a good picture of me that popped up. I think one of the photographers actually may have been one of our coaches that took it. It was actually when I was doing that Explore lock. It's a picture of me doing it, and there's like people in the background, but like it's almost very like man in the arena kind of thing. is where you're there doing it yourself and you know you're getting judged. And then there's all these other people around just watching you do this, judging every little step that you make, every choice that you make. And that puts a lot of pressure on you. You know what I mean? And that's one thing that you have to be kind of cognizant of, because when that pressure gets on you, that's when you start forgetting the little things. Like, oh man, I took my safety glasses off and then I never put them back on. You know, I set this torque wrench down, but I never reset it to 0. I cut this lock wire, but I didn't pay attention to where the little piece came off. Or I cut that safety wire and I didn't pay attention to where that little piece went to. So yeah, when that pressure's on, it's almost more important to be, you know, cognizant of those fundamental things that you're taught on day one of training as an aircraft maintainer.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because now that I'm hearing you say this is definitely like something that once you've experienced this and you've seen that kind of pressure, I mean, besides from the military gents, you have all these other different organizations in there. That's something they can take back and teach down, right? Like, hey, like, this is what it feels like to have this kind of pressure. So now, like, that sense of urgency that MVP and I talk about, like, some people, like, they don't have the requirements as a mission would, or a high paying revenue flight would have. So like some outfits, they get a little lackadaisical with their work ethic. So being exposed to this in all different levels of the industry and being able to go back to where you're from and teach that down, or whatever, I'm totally butchering this phrase, but being able to use that as a learning moment, like, hey, this is what it feels like.
Right.
And so once you're used to that level of pressure, like, once it becomes natural for you to experience, it makes you focus less on the distractions and focus more on the task at hand.
Exactly.
So and I did want to ask about, because I remember there was this one grading criteria, I'm not sure if it's still there, where they said you get extra points if you come up with some innovative way to get the job done. I believe that's the way it was worded. Like, you get extra points for, like, if you figure out a better way to do the job. And I would assume, like,
that's cool.
Those kind of avenues have already been explored, but maybe someone, like, I kind of think of students mostly, because they're the ones who, like, never had that this is how I've always done it attitude yet.
Yeah.
Keyword yet. And so, like, they're the ones most open-minded to explore different ways of doing things. So I'm wondering if, like, how that's scored, for one, and then two, like, what made them, like, well, what genie in the bottle gave them that idea, like, hey, you should probably add this in, you know, just to kind of, like, throw some spice to it. So, like, now it's not just a new experience, it's a learning curve for all these different organizations who created these events. Like, that's a smart idea. We should probably do more of that.
Well, actually, that's a good idea too, right? So do like a post show interviews or whatever, and you say, okay, this team won, and they won because they came up with a creative idea. What was the creative idea? How did you come up? You know, just talking points like that. I think that's very interesting, right? It's a little bit of value stream mapping applied to our daily task.
Yeah, I've never thought about that. That's pretty clever, especially from like the sponsor's point of view, right? So like you have these big companies bringing in their equipment for these guys to work on, and they come up with some new way to do it. You know, you take that back to your company and be like, hey, you know, we saw these guys do this. You know, we ran it through our kind of risk management type stuff. It doesn't seem like it devalues the safety at all. Why don't we try this? It makes it a little bit simpler, a little bit leaner. That's pretty smart. I like that.
Right? And yep. It just blew my mind right now. As I'm thinking about it, like, this would be a perfect opportunity for a lot of companies to kind of like do a stress test of their equipment, you know, like,
yeah,
if they're prototyping something, that'd be the place to do it. Like, how do we break this thing without actually destroying it on the, you know, like in a practical setting, you know, or like it's practical enough to see people get dirty with it and do what they should be doing with it. Because I mean, like, there's no other place I can think of other than like a production line where they're allowed to destroy it for the most part. So that might be like some subliminal goal that they all have in mind. Like, this is our way of like proofing, mechanic proofing our stuff, so to speak.
Yeah.
but that's definitely that'd be something cool. And for those out there in the AMC, like if this was part of your plan, we're totally buying into it and we love it. And I want
We
to
found your secrets.
right. We figured it. You figured it out. We found out the blue pill or the red pill for the Matrix. You did mention, like this is for the love of, and being the custodians of our profession, and we've especially grown fond of the AMC because for I'm not dogging any other aviation specialty out there, but a vast majority of aviation stuff that's put out there excludes aircraft maintenance. I don't know if that's
That's because they don't give us the time off from fixing broke birds to go do this kind of stuff.
Got him.
Did I hit was it 2 on the nose or?
Might very well be. But again, so this is kind of like our thing. Like this is, if there's something that's exclusively aircraft maintenance, this is it. And for a lot of individuals, this might be like your entry into a whole scheme of things, a whole like different passion of things. Because some people, they just don't want to fly, or they can, but they cannot, right? Like for whatever reason, they're limited to do that. So they feel like their dream died with being told that they can't fly or can't fly ever again, kind of thing, past tense. But so like showing this being the custodians of our profession, like it really just opens people more to like, hey, there's this other side of the world that exists, not just what you see on television or what kind of pamphlet or whatnot. So here's this whole extra stuff. And I love the fact that the Army's buying in on this because now they appreciate the fact that it's not just the guys who fly in it that make things happen. And I'm hoping that it's not just going to be the military who buys in on this. Like a lot of everybody else starts catching wind of this. Like, oh, okay, so this is what all this entails. This is the world that exists that makes all this other stuff happen. Because as MVP said, we don't really have the luxury of having a voice to talk about this kind of stuff. And there's maybe 4 total in all of Spotify universe dumb or the Podiverse that exists that talk about it, and we're one of the 4. So
I'll jump in here a little bit on that. I can tell you. So what I won't do, I will not say whether or not people in the Army have kind of disregarded maintainers, right? But I will say is for sure that the competitors that are on the 2 teams that we're sending this year are among some of the most talented and most dedicated maintainers I've ever known in the Army. And not dedicated just to maintenance, but their passion about it is contagious. And, like I said, we work here at a schoolhouse where we're training new maintainers, and that bleeds into their classes, which is really incredible to see. And then a few years ago, I was in Afghanistan, and obviously, we had missions flying every day. And what a lot of people don't think about with that is when those birds aren't flying, they're generally getting worked on, right? Whether it's repairs or it's upkeep. And I was running a crew out there, a very small crew, smaller than we should have been. And I watched those guys and girls every single day work 12, 14, 16 hours a day, whether it was raining, whether there was massive dust storms coming in to make sure those aircraft were ready to fly. And being a part of that is just really inspiring. And I think ever since that deployment, there was a part of me that just kind of wanted to like find a way to, show that to the masses, like the dedication that goes behind keeping these airplanes or these helicopters, whatever it's going to be, in the sky as safe as they are. It's truly incredible thing to witness, like from a leadership standpoint.
We've had discussions about that and how to showcase those individuals. and really, I mean, other than you writing your people up for, with just excellent reports, after action reports to the, superiors or whatever. But I'm a big proponent of you got to showcase the mission for which they were supporting. I spent a number of years in Afghanistan and Iraq and other locations as well with a very, very skeleton crew. We were a half skeleton crew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Working similar hours like you and your team were, and it was the mission behind it. You had a sense of purpose. I have to get this up to support the guys on the ground. They need Overwatch support, and they need it yesterday. You know, so
Right.
I think that's a big way, and I know we try to do it on here some, but it's good to hear that there's others out there like yourself who are doing the same thing. But I think that's a great way to is to have those people tell their stories and talk about the mission they were supporting. To a degree, I understand some things are classified or whatever else, but you talk about you mentioned an infectious kind of passion, and those are the people that need to be talking about it.
Absolutely.
To get it across, you know.
Absolutely.
And that's more or less like that's our end goal, and pretty much all of this. Like it's not it's not the clout chasing that a lot of people assume, which I'm sure there's some out there who would, but I think that's maybe mostly ingrained for us as aircraft mechanics is we don't really care about the credit. We just care more that it progresses, right? That it continues on, right?
So here's something, maybe with the AMC, do they, tying in with my recent experience here at the High Heli Expo, they had these different symposiums throughout the day where different leaders or people from various companies, they come in and they talk about a specific subject. What would be interesting is if the AMC would offer, I don't know if they do or not, but if they don't, I would hope that they would listen to this and maybe take the idea and run. But getting people like you just spoke about, Charles, and get those people on that platform to talk in front of other maintainers, say, hey, the year was 2014. We were at such and such base, Afghanistan. Our mission at the time was this, and here was our situation. We had a bird down for this problem, and it was running and gunning, rockets overhead kind of thing. But we made it happen. We got the bird up, and subsequently 25 special forces individuals were able to make it complete mission and get back home safely, no casualties. That kind of thing. I think that would be like to hear those stories from one maintainer to another who's sitting in the crowd. Talk about just like, whoa, man, this is like, it's a whole new renewed sense of purpose. And even if you're not working in active war zone and say you're working on a big carrier, but you go back to your hangar and you're like, hey, I got to do this job to the best of my ability because there's 150 people that are going to be on this thing tomorrow, and they need to make their location safely, and they're going to do that because I'm doing what I got to do right. That would be really, really cool to get people up there talking.
Especially the ones, have been around the block, like they've seen some craziness, and it's because of their direct actions or a slew of actions that cascaded from them speaking up about something like, hey, something didn't smell right, something didn't look right. I said something, and lo and behold, like this whole plethora of craziness that we just unfolded and prevented. And I think that's something like every mechanic has the ability to do, but just kind of just chalks it up as to just part of the job.
So that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's interesting. What? Hey, I know we're told to shut up and color and do our job, but in this one instance, I stood up against the brass because what they were pushing was not safe. And at the end of the day, it was rough at the time, but I was rewarded for my efforts, or I was commended for not being afraid to stand up and do what was right.
Yeah. We're totally going on a tangent here, man. But that's definitely one. It was definitely something that we appreciated when we were at the High Helo Expo. Just like all these different stories and lessons and just sessions, like this really got your brain turning. And so, like, we're not sure if the AMC does do stuff like that, but it'd be totally awesome if they did, even if it's an online only thing, like a mechanic spotlight or something, right? A 5-minute riff with this person, like just sing their good graces.
I can see that becoming like a YouTube series or something like that. The way the AMC is set up is it's pretty much strictly competition because it's like that subsect of the MRO America's Trade Show, right?
Right.
And I know the MRO America's Trade Show, they have those, those industry speakers that come in and give talks on stuff, and things like that. But I don't think the AMC's set up right now for anything to do like that. But yeah, you probably talked to Ken about that. He'd probably give you more details.
Ooh, most definitely. We're gonna pick his brain about that.
Yeah, I don't know like what their plans are for the future. So yeah, definitely something. He's a great guy to talk to. If you reach out to him, he's got lots of great ideas, things like that. So
most definitely something we're gonna reach out about, because again, like, we love highlighting this stuff and we love putting it out there, so it's not your efforts are not going unnoticed. Because if there's one thing we've learned that all mechanics do is they just go head down and just do the job. They don't. It's not so much they don't care about the results; they just don't feel like it's something to celebrate for majority of the stuff that they do. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, a lot of them are very humble. A lot of them. I mean, that same rotation in Afghanistan, right? I was off shift and my crew was working. They went to Chow. They came back. Something had happened, and they had to take that component off and replace it with a new one. And by this time, their shift was about over, and they stayed an extra, I think, 6 hours to make sure it was done right, because they knew they had made a mistake in the first place, and that's why it had gotten messed up. And they were so dedicated to seeing it through, man. They just worked an extra 6 hours after their shift.
That's what's up.
Yeah, I did the leader thing and kind of razzed them on it a little bit. Like, you guys can't be working yourselves to death. I still need you guys functional. But like, the wrench turner in me still, like, I understood that. And I was like, mad respect, man. Like, I'd have done the same thing. Like, I got you.
Right. Totally all about it. And definitely, like, AMC, Mr. Ken, or anyone else otherwise, if that's a project that's in line, I mean, we'll talk you through it. We'll help make it happen some way or another. As humble as mechanics are, like, it's a totally, it hits different when you actually put it in front of them. Like, hey, you did a fantastic job. You're doing all the right things. You're an example, right? They won't say it outright, but you get that little glimmer of hope in their eyes, when something like that does get dropped on their lap. I mean, speaking from experience. So,
oh yeah. And that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to kind of push with the Army sponsoring this event, right? Obviously, they're looking at it, or a lot of people are looking at it as, how many recruits can we get from like doing this, right? Mm-hmm. The return on investment, essentially. And I've really just been trying hard to kind of emphasize that this is an opportunity to kind of change how we tell Army aviation story, right, to the general public. Like, somebody's mom out there is telling their kid, like, you don't want to join the Army for X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, let me tell you this really cool story that happened when I was a mechanic in, such and such place. I used teamwork, there was leadership involved, there was problem solving. And on top of that, I was using this really awesome skill set that the Army trained me to do. And so I really wanted the event to highlight essentially how somebody can, join the Army, get a skill, and go out to the civilian aviation world and take those traits with them.
That's definitely a very good one. And it's true. You would definitely have some who would naysay and say some other stuff, but for the most part, man, like, there's a lot of skills that or untapped potential that you can utilize that can carry with you anywhere we go. And MVP and I are a testament to this. Not necessarily the Army, but it's a similar thing. And for those out there, like, this is definitely a big goal, not just for Mr. Hayward, but for everybody in general. Like, this is us showcasing our things, and this is a different way to tell the story of aviation, not just the Top Gun stuff, so to speak.
Yeah.
or like the negative things, right? Like the bad stuff you hear in the news or whatever. So like there's some good stuff going, and it's because of these individuals or these types of technicians and specialists that make it happen.
Right.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
gonna go start breaking torque and stuff now.
Yeah.
Anything else about anything, Mr. MVP?
Listening to you talk, I've kind of been thinking of an event that I think would be a good addition. Not this year, obviously it's too close, but like perhaps for the next one, it'd be a kind of a neat event and would test people's communication skills.
Ooh, I like it. I love it.
Yeah,
I do like that. I'm a big one for communication.
Is it kind of like that telephone game? You know what I mean? Like you start at the end of the room and it's like way different when it gets to the other end.
No, what I guess, yeah, I'll talk about it. So what I think would be cool is that, all right, you've got experience in, let's use your rotor track. Was it rotor track and balance?
Main rotor track and balance.
Yep, main rotor track and balance. So you've got experience with that. Now you have to teach, let's say, the FedEx team how to do that. So what tipped me off is you said you're working in a schoolhouse, and I said, okay, well, he's got to be able to teach people who have never done this before, might not ever flown in a helicopter. The only thing they've ever seen is a helicopter fly overhead for medevac or something. Now you got to be able to teach somebody who's never dealt with a helicopter before how to do this job and how to do it right, safe and safely in the shortest amount of time. How good are your communication skills to be able to read the caution, safeties, and warning, but also be able to teach? I don't know. Yeah. Something I was thinking that'd be kind of interesting.
Or kind of like a maintenance control stress test. That'd be a good one. That would trip a lot of people up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got 3 planes, make it happen. You have a 5-plane requirement and all 5 of them are broke. What are you gonna do? Can it all?
Actually, that would be a good one too. A maintenance control stress test. You have 5 aircraft of varying statuses. Which one do you do to make these 3 flights the next day? What do you do? What are you cannon from? What's priority number 1? What's status 2? How do you make this work?
Right. 10 minutes. Go. Hurry up, man. Flights need to happen.
I like that. Those are good ideas.
With a radio from the superiors barking in your ear the whole time you're trying to make the decision. Oh man,
that'd be hilarious.
What a great one.
I mean, it probably have to be really churched down and controlled, but you know what I mean? Like that would be fantastic, especially, for those who've never been in a mock environment before or a maintenance operations control before. That'd be a real humbling experience for some, because I mean, let's face it, there's some mechanics out there who totally can feel that they can do a mock job and have never set foot in a mock position. So it'd be a good one.
Managing it is way different than doing it.
Oh, yes. I think I lost a good majority of my sleep being in mock or being in maintenance control. MVP can attest.
Yeah. There's some days. Boy, I think both of those, that the teaching one, being able to teach somebody who's never done the job before, and then that maintenance control stress test. Oh, those would be wild and different. So somebody's, hey, and you say, why do you want to do that competition? Well, I think the natural progression is at some point your lead maintainer might have to move into control. And I think for the military, that's more certain than it would be in a civilian environment. Am I correct in that?
You're pretty straight on.
Yeah. So you could say it's one of those like, hey, this is the natural progression. Let's see. Have you done it before? No. Great. Now we're going to see what it'll be a quick and dirty taste of it for the competitors.
Yes. I'm all about it. Any final words for everybody out there, Mr. Hayward?
No, I'm looking forward to meeting everybody in Chicago. Big thanks to those who have reached out to me. You guys have sent some awesome questions, and I was super happy to address those. Some of the questions made me laugh. which makes me look forward to the event even more. Yeah, there's some really great people that are going to be out at the competition this year. Chicago's a great city for the competitors, if you guys have never been there. So in your free time, I encourage you to kind of get out there and experience it. It's a very working class city, which is cool because aviation maintenance is very working class people. So I think everyone will have a great time out there. I hope I've still been working out how I can kind of promote this on social media without, crossing certain lines. So I've been mostly using my personal Instagram account for that. And, kind of connecting with the real important influencers out there. So hopefully they'll help me out with that a little bit. But obviously, the more interaction we get, the easier it'll be for us to do, kind of continue sponsoring it like for the next year and the year after that. And so I cannot promise that that we'll be sponsoring every year. But obviously, depending on how this one goes, is going to determine a lot of that. There's going to be a lot more work for me to do once we come back from Chicago. But yeah, for all the competitors, man, you guys come take pictures, send me your pictures. I'm going to share them. All the data I can collect, that's just going to help us, come back again next year. Probably with a different event. I feel like the PC link adjustment is going to be pretty easy for most teams. And we wanted it that way to kind of give you guys a taste of it. And then next year, if we're able to come back, something a bit more complicated, something a bit more labor intensive. So yeah, the more you guys are able to interact with us, the better it'll work out for us in the long term.
Most def. And we definitely hope and look forward to the best. We hope that it does continue to be a sponsored event and more stuff gets added to it. For those who are looking into the Aerospace Maintenance Competition, they have all sorts of social media handles you can look for. I think their most active one is on Instagram at AMC Aero, I believe is the tag. The AMC event itself is from April 9th to the 11th. Again, like Charles said, it's in Chicago. They do live stream the competition too. So if you follow their Instagram at AMC Aero, or you go to the website at aerospacecompetition.com, they do live stream these events. So if you're unable to go, you can still catch the events. They'll have the award ceremony and all that. They'll show the different teams at different events at different times. I don't think they have a specific channel for each event as they're concurring or whatnot. I think they just kind of switch back and forth like a sports channel. But again, like these are ways for you all to check it out. If you're in the vicinity, please by all means go see the event. We ourselves would love to go to at some point. I'm not sure we'll be able to make it this year, but we're hoping to. And again, like this is ways for you to know more about the event, to spread the word about it. And then just, if you're looking to get into aviation, this is definitely one place you do want to check out to really see how everything works, or at least some of the best trained professionals out there work. But hey, let us know let us know what you guys think. What are some stuff about the AMC you like to learn about? What some stuff have you experienced and like to share about? Let us know in the comments, our social medias, email, our website. The absolute best way to get a hold of us and share some of this stuff is through our Discord channel via Patreon. We have all sorts of conversations like this. We trade blows. It's a big learning experience for everyone involved. On that note, hey, we appreciate all of you for listening, and we'll see you all again on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
We would like to take this time to thank our patrons for supporting our show and allowing us to make episodes, maintain our gear, and create merch for all of our listeners. With special thanks to Erica Lamont, Chris Hawkins, Eric Shaw, Dan Schubert, Ryan Frushauer, Kyle Keir, Mike Sherwood, Caleb Stockhill, and Jennifer Brofer. Thank you all so much for your support and patronage. If you like our show, please support us on Patreon. You'll receive awesome perks like access to our private Discord, discounts and early access to our merch, first glimpse of our comics and other projects, and so much more. You can further support us and show off your prowess as an aircraft specialist by visiting our shop at cancelformaintenance.com. If you like classy or rugged watches, visit our affiliate Rockwell Time at rockwelltime.com. Use the code CX, the number 4MX to save 10% off your total order. If you have suggestions for the show or you'd like to be a guest on the show, send us a line on our contact us section at cancelformaintenance.com and we'll do what we can to get both your ideas and yourself on the show. Please support us on social media like Facebook at Cancel for Maintenance, Instagram at CANX for Maintenance Podcast, or Twitter at CXMX Podcast. Please check out our new comic series on the Tapas app. Like, share, subscribe, and comment on our comics. Let us know what you think. Thank you all so much for your support and listenership, and we will catch you all next time.